Welcome to another video done by Birchville Beauty's Caviary. This is a guinea pig bedding video. Things to look out for when you're trying to choose bedding for your guinea pigs is to make sure you always check any bedding ingredients before buying. Even different beddings within the same brand, like Katie, some are acceptable and some are not. So just always read the ingredients on it before you buy it. Even if they change the packaging, they may change the ingredients. So always double check before you buy your bedding. And do not buy scented bedding like lavender or chamomile, which is what I'm showing in the pictures from the Katie brand down below. Guinea pigs' respiratory systems are very delicate, so putting them on a bedding that is scented where it's right in their face all the time is just not a good idea for their respiratory system. So don't buy scented bedding. And do not buy beddings that contain baking soda or carbon. A lot of the ones that say they have odor control, odor stop, definitely make sure that it does not contain the baking soda or carbon, because both are toxic to guinea pigs. And note that just because there's a guinea pig picture on the bedding or even if it says it's for them, it still may not be a safe choice to use. So again, check your ingredients. Not scented bedding, no baking soda, and no carbon. What I will be considering about each bedding and mentioning for each one is the price of the bedding, saying whether it's a mid-price, cheap, or expensive. The comfort level for the animals, whether it's a soft bedding or a hard bedding. The smell of the bedding itself, as well as the odor control of the bedding. The ease of cleaning whatever bedding I'm talking about. And the durability of the bedding. I first want to mention hay, straw, and hemp type beddings. Guinea pigs do really love to burrow in hay, so large quantities make a nice natural looking top layer to your cage, but hay is not absorbent, so it can't be the only layer in your cage. You still have to have like paper underneath, or even your fleece liners, but there has to be something underneath to absorb the pee and everything. You can't just have hay. The same is said for straw, and it's really great for colder areas to insulate a hutch, but again, it's not absorbent, so you need to have something absorbent under the straw. Hemp is not absorbent either, but it's good for people that have outdoor areas that their guinea pigs could go into, especially if there's just dirt, and it would typically be wet. If you put a little layer of hemp down, the moisture will go through it, but the hemp stays dry. So it's really great for outdoor areas, but I wouldn't suggest it in a cage because you would still need an absorbent layer underneath. The first cage bedding that I'm going to talk about is paper, not the pellet style. I really don't know what to call this style. It's like shredded up lumps of paper, I guess. Some of the major brands are the Katie and the Carefresh. Some pros for this bedding are that there are so many colors and there's lots of variations. You can do so many things with your cage and make it really pretty and interesting. It is very soft, and there is less dust than wood shavings, but I have noticed that there is a decent amount of dust. Mind you, some of the dust that I'm noticing could be from ground up pellets that have turned to dust in the cage, or even some hay dust, but there's still dust in the cage, so it's not a dust-free bedding. And there is like no smell to paper bedding. I mean, it smells like paper, but you don't have a wood smell in your house, so that's kind of a good pro for me. I don't particularly like smelling wood shavings all the time. Some cons for this bedding is that it is very expensive. It's one of the most expensive beddings, and it is harder to spot clean. You can definitely tell which areas are wet and take out the wet areas, but as far as the poops go, you really can't take them out. Sometimes the pigs will like harden the bedding down from walking on it, and sometimes you can pick up some of the poo on top, but most of it will just go through the bedding and end up under the bedding, which, I mean, you can't see the poops, so I guess that's okay. And it's not like they smell, but it's hard to clean up the poo. Now I'm going to talk about compressed pellet style bedding. Paper first. Pros for this type bedding is that it is a midline price. It's pretty cheap, depending on how you find it. Yesterday's News here pictured is a good brand. It's actually considered a cat litter, but if it's sold as a cat litter, it's cheaper than if you buy it as a small animal bedding. So that's one way that you can buy it. But again, always double check because they have different formulas. Some are scented and some have baking soda, so make sure that they don't have that. There is no wood smell, so that's nice. And it has really good odor control, even though it doesn't contain baking soda or carbon. And the paper version holds together really nice after it gets wet. It just kind of swells up a little bit, but it stays held together really well. Excuse me. Some cons to the paper bedding is that it's not the cheapest bedding available, but it's also not the most expensive. And it is only in one color. It just comes in this gray because it's recycled paper. And it's not very soft underfoot, and it's kind of loud, to be honest, if you have it in a plastic area or on coroplast, corrugated plastic in your cage. It's quite loud when they're walking on it, so that might be something that you don't like. Compressed pellet continued. We're going to talk about wood, which oftentimes you see at like Tractor Supply Company or Farm and Fleet type store. And they do absorb a lot of liquid, and it is extremely cheap. There is a less wood smell over shavings, but it's still going to smell like wood, and it is cheaper than Carefresh or Katie paper bedding. Some cons to this is that it crumbles to dust once it's wet. I mean, it falls apart and becomes this giant lump of dust in your cage. So it's very easy to tell what parts were wet, but at the same time, with guinea pigs' respiratory systems being so delicate, I would not recommend using a wood pellet at all. And it is very hard. It's not comfortable for them to walk on. It has no give to it at all. It's extremely hard. The paper bedding, although it's hard, if you push on it, it has a little give to it. This is just extremely hard. It feels like you're pushing on rocks. Wood shavings, which I'm going to mention here. If talking to people from the UK in particularly, they might mention sawdust for their cage bedding, but they're really just talking about wood shavings. That's just what they tend to call it. Some pros for wood shavings are that they are cheap. They are absorbent, and they have a nice natural look and odor, and they're pretty soft underfoot. Some cons to them is the wood smell. Although some people might think that the wood smell is a pro and they like it, I don't like it. I don't want my whole house to smell like wood shavings. So for me, it's a con. If you have long-haired breeds especially, it's going to get stuck in their hair pretty badly. Sometimes the shredded up paper can get stuck in their hair, but wood shavings is guaranteed it's going to get stuck in their fur. Especially Texel, the curly-haired breeds, they are not recommended to use wood chips at all because it's going to end up all stuck in their hair. Again, because it's little bits of bedding, the poo's going to fall right through it, and it's going to be hard to spot clean up the poops. Obviously, the wet spots will be quite noticeable and easy to get out, but not so much the poo. And for me, people with allergies and asthma might find that they can't use wood shavings at all. It's going to bother your allergies really bad, which in my case it does a lot. And I didn't put it in a bullet, but I wanted to mention that when you're using wood shavings, it has to be kiln dried, because that gets rid of as much of the odor as can be taken away from the wood. If it's not kiln dried, the wood shavings are going to have a whole lot more odor, and it's just going to be horrible for a guinea pig's respiratory system. So if you are going to choose a wood shaving, it has to be aspen or pine. Never cedar. It's too strongly scented. Even if it's kiln dried, don't ever do cedar. So only aspen or pine, and it has to be kiln dried. I'm going to mention fleece now. These two pictures, the top one appears to be already sewn together cage liners, and the bottom one is just someone advertising a kit that they make up with a couple potty pads and a little bed with a pillow and the cage liner itself. Some pros to having fleece are that there are endless colors, patterns, endless possibilities really. Whatever you want to decorate your cage, you can do it. Once purchased, these can be used for years. I know people that have had the same cage liners for 5 years. It is very soft and it's very warm, especially for people that have the hairless skinny pigs. Fleece is recommended because those pigs tend to get cold. So fleece bedding is a great product for them particularly. Fleece is an odor-free bedding. I mean, it doesn't have any smell to it at all. So those with allergies might find it to be the best choice. And it is really good on odor control, but that depends on what your liner is made out of besides just the fleece, or what layers you use in your cage besides fleece. You might not use a liner that's already sewn together, but depending on what you use for your absorbent layer with your fleece is going to intensify or de-intensify how fast it smells. So fleece can be excellent when used the right way. Some cons to fleece is that it does cost a lot, initial cost. For instance, I have a Midwest cage, and you buy a fleece liner. The cheapest I can find is $36 for a made liner, and you can find them all the way up to $55. So you figure you spend $55, that's a lot of bags of bedding. But at the same time, I only have to spend the $55 one time, and I could use it for at least 5 years. So high initial cost, but then over time you never have to buy bedding again. So in the long run, it saves money. You do have to have a washer or dryer. Some people that might live in apartments might not have a washer and dryer in their own place. Having to go and launder your guinea pig fleece somewhere and pay money to do it might be a con for people. And it might be a con for people because they don't want to wash their peed-on guinea pig fleece with the washer that they wash their family's clothes in. Some family members might just be totally disgusted and not want that to happen. So that can be a con for a lot of people. The cage has to be cleaned or tidied up often. I only do it every couple days or so. There are some people that will sweep the poops off the fleece a couple times a day. I don't really find that that's necessary. I mean, the poops don't make the fleece smell, so there's no point to cleaning that off. But you want to keep the cage kind of tidy. I have kitchen areas, so those areas get changed every other day. The poops get swept up every other day, just to keep the cage looking really nice, because it's not like the poops are going to be hidden down in the bedding. They're going to be right there on top and showing, so That's why people end up tidying the cage so often. Some more notes about fleece as a bedding, because I see a lot of people make the mistake of just buying a piece of fabric or a blanket and throwing it in the cage. And you can't just do that. Fleece in its natural state repels water. So if your guinea pig pees on it, it's just going to bubble up there and sit on top of the fleece. And then your guinea pig's going to get extremely wet and extremely smelly from their own urine. Fleece does take prep work to get it to wick fluids through. So you have to wash it with a free and clear detergent. I usually wash it 3 times and then check it to see if it'll wick the water through. And then I'll wash it a couple more times and check it again. Possibly wash it a couple more times and check it again. Generally, about 5 washings of fleece will get it to wick the fluids through, and then it is ready to put it in the cage. But fleece needs to be prepped so that the fluids will wick through it, and then when a guinea pig pees on it, the pee goes right through it and doesn't sit on top. That being said, once the pee goes through your fleece layer, there should be another fabric layer underneath that is something else that is absorbent. So when people say, oh, I use fleece in my cage, it's not just fleece. There is an absorbent layer underneath the fleece, which could be U-Haul furniture pads, Zorb fabric, which is the fabric used in cloth diapers, old towels, mattress pads, or incontinence pads, which could be the disposable ones or the reusable cloth ones. The disposable ones, obviously, you wouldn't have sewn into a liner because they would get ruined. But all these other items, you can sew them together to make a cage liner. That being said, you don't have to sew your layers together and make cage liners. You can use separate layers of fleece, but you have to have fleece on top and something absorbent underneath. And then your cage should be waterproof already, whether it's made out of the Midwest canvas bottom or a plastic bottom cage or the corrugated plastic bottom cages. That's your waterproof barrier. So anything that can't be held in that absorbent layer won't ruin whatever surface your cage is sitting on, as long as your cage has a waterproof bottom of some sort. But basically, they're usually just 2 or 3 layers. People usually do fleece with U-Haul inside and fleece on the back, just to keep it looking nice. I think after so many washings, the U-Haul furniture pads will break down, so they're sandwiched with fleece just to make sure that that liner lasts as long as possible. In conclusion, the choice is yours. It's what you're most comfortable using, and honestly, what's comfortable to your bank account. Personally, in my cages, which I have a lot of cages, I have 6 Midwest cages. 2 of those I've replaced the bases with corrugated plastic, but they're still a Midwest cage size. And 2 other cages that are 2x3s, the CNC cages. And I use fleece liners for the whole bottom of the cage with a little plastic area that is a kitchen area, and those I put pelleted paper in, and I change those out more often. The fleece gets changed about once a week, and then the kitchen area about every other day I take the wet out and replace it. So I am buying the pelleted paper bedding almost every week, but it's only $10 for 25 pounds, and it lasts the whole week at least, maybe even 2 weeks, honestly, in all these cages that I have. And then my fleece liners did cost me a lot of money, but now I'm never having to buy bedding again, so I'm loving that as far as my bank account goes. And if I was able to spend whatever amount of money I wanted to, I probably would just do paper bedding, because the colors are really awesome and it's just a really fun thing to use. Although the expense at this time keeps me from using it. I have too many cages. There's no way that I could afford that much paper bedding. So I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was informative and that it helps you make an informed decision about what bedding that you might like to try in your guinea pig's cage. Thank you. Leave a thumbs up so that I know I'm doing something right, and I will continue to make more videos.